So one of the things about being in meetings and events, we're both type A's. So we like to make our lists, have our work back schedule that goes 12 months and know exactly what it is that we're going to be doing.
Yes.
And know that we're going to be successful also because we know what the heck we're doing. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the last couple of years have sort of knocked my feet out from underneath of me as I've had to completely shift what success looks like and how I get to success. So as you think about the agility that you've needed over the last couple of years, what did that mean to you in real world situations? Did you ever have a plan and then the plan backfired on you and you had to do something completely different? Like, how did you rally the team around that? How did you get the executive team to really have that shared vision with you? What did that look like?
Well, I think everyone who watches this can relate with the fact that having to shift your entire plan into something brand new last minute is daunting when you're such a planner and you're like, I have my plan in place and now you just threw it in the garbage. So it's, it causes anxiety, but also I think being a planner, we instantly just snap into like, okay, how do we make this work in the way that we have to now? And doing it virtually, like with Untethered while we were here today in the studio, was maybe 2 weeks of time that we actually spent putting a plan in place. It was a very, very quick turnaround from we're going to do something in person and now we're just going to keep it virtual. So I think I would say, take a step back, breathe, relax, see what you already planned and what you can utilize from that plan to your new plan. Because there are definitely nuggets of what you wanted to do originally that can be still created in a different way. And
it's like the goals and objectives don't really change, right? It's just the physical environment that you're in. But I think sometimes, let's take Untethered, for example. Like, we spent months thinking about how can we really test the bounds about what hybrid actually looks like. What does it mean to be sitting in a chair and participating in person with a virtual audience? What does it mean to beam people in and have speakers from all over the world? So that was a big part of the excitement. And when we realized that the hospitals were full and that we didn't really feel comfortable with asking people to fly, to me, that's the pit in the stomach moment. Like, I actually cried. I was so frustrated because all of this hard work, energy, love, effort, excitement, it's sort of like you're creating and crafting this beautiful thing as an artist, and then you have to be like, it's ugly, get out of here, do something different.
We got so far too, I feel like. So like the sentiment of like, I just wanted to cry is so real. We like really, I feel like, had pretty much everything in place. So it was like an idea and concept that I was like ready to get going, So it was hard, but it's also like, this was super fun to be here and do this in a studio and, watch you and the keynote speakers and the panelists all do their thing from wherever they were. And it still made it a fun experience, even though maybe some of us weren't in a restaurant eating together or anything.
I think it's all about resetting expectations. And so, there's always sort of a preferred route. But one thing that I know about meeting planners is if we have a problem, put meeting planners on it. It'll get solved regardless of what the problem is. It's why I was so excited when COVID hit, how so many meetings professionals stepped in to actually help build hospitals and manage lines and sort of manage the resourcing, because that's what we do. And I think it's all in how we give ourselves some grace, which is one of the hardest things to do as a type A, but to say, yes, I did this well, and yes, I need to do this even better in a different format. So for me today, waking up, I was slightly bummed that I wasn't going down to an office where I could give people hugs and that we could be in the same room. But at the same time, it really hit me in terms of, but the goals and objectives were to connect people, to give them an opportunity to feel support. And so I think our ability to, over just a couple of weeks, say, how do we actually do that? Like, our content completely changed, our agenda completely changed, our messaging changed. But today, sitting here, it feels so different. And even though we're in a studio with just a couple of people, I feel that same sort of excitement of the show and the energy level. Our reality is really what we put around us. And so today, walking into the room, I think it's up to us to say, this is success, and that we are meeting the goals and objectives of the event, even though it looks a little bit different. And so keeping that agility in mind is so important, because things are never going to go back to what they were. There is no normal anymore.
Right. One thing that just came to mind about arriving today for Untethered, last week and this week, we're like, what do we got to do to get it ready? What's the things that we're missing that we need to make sure we're implementing before we get to Thursday morning? And rehearsals are super important, I think. I mean, even if you do it virtually, there are elements of running through the entire plan as a team that you won't catch if you're just like, are we missing anything? Maybe we should test it out and see if we're missing anything.
Yeah,
That's something I think we didn't have a lot of time to do this time around because we did shift so quickly into this environment. Regardless, I think it's been super successful. But yeah, some things you can't always plan for, and you just have to make it happen.
I sort of liken that to when we used to run a big tech conference together, and we would force, it was like 120 something crew into the crew office and go line by line through the production schedule. You're pulling tape at 6:05 a.m. and then you're going and laying carpet, and I think in a digital world, we lose some of that discipline because we think it's different. But again, going to your point, it's not different at all.
Yeah.
It's just a different application of what we already know how to do.
Right.
As we think about the events industry and some of the tough decisions that we have in front of us, for Untethered, we went back and forth for a couple of weeks of should we have the event, should we not? And it's hard to know when to make that call.
Yeah.
What type of information did you process through, or how did you come to the conclusion to say, yes, I think we need to postpone this event?
Well, I think the first thing really to think about is how much of the in-person planning elements were locked and loaded. Like, can we actually back out of this? What is the implication if we do back out of this, like with your venue, or if you ordered catering maybe? Some of those elements you might be kind of stuck in the hole, and if you look at your event budget and it's fine, let's do that, then you go to the next thing of, okay, what is the experience that we're going to change to give to our audience, and does it make sense? One really big thing for Untethered this year was traveling. We were so concerned about the safety of people and their comfort level, and you don't want to force anyone to do anything they're not comfortable with, and ultimately I think we realized, regardless of how much of the in-person elements were planned and ready to go, the audience and their comfort and their experience was more important. And so we decided, yes, let's make this still an event for people to come and see what we're doing and how we can test things out, but make it in a way that's not going to make people feel like they're risking things by traveling to come.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many golden nuggets in there as I think about when we plan our events, needing optionality as a part of our events. So thinking about how do I sign contracts with an out clause, and what does that out clause look like? And how can I make sure then that I put my timeline planning into place according to how I protect the business? Because that was a big piece of flexibility for us.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also just a note in terms of being able to think about the value that you're driving for people and what the time frame of that value needs to be. So I would assume that if we had gotten closer to the event and people already had travel booked and they had their own personal appointments booked, it's a frustration point for them as well. And so if we put those types of dates and plans way ahead of time, we can sort of look at that and say, okay, with a clear head, without being stressed out, here's our review points, here's what we're going to evaluate to see if this is going to be successful or not. Anytime we can pre-plan prior to reacting. Reacting isn't always a gut emotional thing versus pre-planning allows us to make those informed decisions without the emotion that protects the business as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that has come out of our past however long of virtual planning. People are, I think, thinking about what's the contingency plan more than they had in the past. Are we going to force people to travel? What's our go, no-go date? And based on where we're going, it's something that's, I think, more important now than it had been before.
I think it's also really important for us to determine, right now we're talking about virtual or in person. And I think the future really is, it's sort of omni-channel. And so there's a value for people coming in person. There's a value for digital. So as I think about backup plans, it's really what are we doing digitally? And then how are we adding on to that in an in-person way?
Yeah.
And so as we really define what inclusive means, which I think is one of the top topics that we have across the industry right now, design and events can be inclusive. And so part of your backup plan could be work you're already doing, because you're saying, hey, half my audience or maybe more is already virtual. And so when you need to make that pivot or that change closer to the event, it's a little bit less impactful, because it's not like you're ripping one thing out for another.
Right.
But I think that's the challenge that we have as meetings professionals, is not to say, I'm gonna go back only in person. That's what I know, it's how it's happening, because the world is shifting and changing, and that mindset is not going to serve our communities.